After 2015, encounters grew sharper and more frequent. Lights, dreams, and silence trained anonymous circles to remain steady as a new stage of extraterrestrial contact unfolded. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe about extraterrestrial contact. By 2015, the anonymous circles had become something sturdier than rumor. What began as scattered, tentative vigils had matured into a quiet culture with habits, guardrails, and a shared sense of purpose. The people who gathered under open skies were not chasing spotlight moments. They were rehearsing composure. They arrived early, checked their gear, reviewed the evening's simple plan, and agreed, again, to value accuracy over entertainment. The working premise was modest and demanding at once. If non-human intelligence approached, could a human nervous system remain lucid enough to meet the moment without collapsing into panic, fantasy, or performance? That question shaped everything from breath patterns to note-taking. That year, the field notes changed tone. Timelines once dotted by isolated anomalies started to show clusters. Independent circles, unaware of each other's schedules, recorded near-identical sequences within narrow windows. Environmental hush, a bone-deep hum at the edge of hearing, emergence of one or more points along the horizon, a tightening into clean geometry, a triangle held against wind, followed by a dimming that behaved more like brightness folding inward than an object departing. No one called these entries proof, they called them patterns. Patterns can be argued with, but they can also be trained with. The environment's participation became impossible to ignore. Insects fell quiet as if a dimmer switch had been turned. Breezes paused mid-gesture. Distant sounds flattened, like cloth pressed between glass. Participants wrote these preludes down with the same restraint they applied to lights, time, direction, duration, and the particular flavor of bodily sensation. Some described pressure behind the eyes, others felt a warmth sweep the forearms. A few noted a metallic taste that arrived and vanished like a coin touched to the tongue. When logs from distant regions were compared weeks later, the preludes matched as often as the lights did. Dreams intensified too, but not in the sensational way outsiders expect. People woke before dawn with the sense that they had been coached rather than dazzled. The spaces were circular, the light source diffuse, and the lessons physical. Lengthen the exhale, soften the jaw when surprise clenches it, allow the shoulders to settle, stand with feet grounded as if roots could steady breath. Symbols appeared underfoot, more geometry than language, that seemed to hum meaning rather than speak it. Participants wrote before speaking, so the texture of the dreams could be compared without contamination by conversation. Most striking was the sense of inclusion. Earlier years had often funneled impressions through a few steady individuals. By mid-2015, entire circles reported being taken into the moment at once. Not singled out, included. The aperture seemed wider, the channel less like a spotlight and more like a field. That shift changed the ethic of responsibility. A lone person can be brave and still weep. A group must be coordinated. So circles leaned harder into common rhythms, pre-brief breath together, hand signals for silence, and log now. A commitment to remain seated for 5 minutes after any disappearance so memory could settle before speech began to sculpt it. A pivotal night, retold now in sober detail, looked ordinary until it did not. The air was cold, the moon a thin nail, the horizon clean. The insects' buzz throttled down to silence so complete that the absence felt physical. A single point brightened low and held still, the way a thought holds in the mind. Two more winked into existence, and locked into an equilateral shape. No drift, no strobe logic, no engine signature. Breath slowed. Pens hovered. For long minutes the geometry held, then folded into one and dimmed like a lamp lowered behind milk glass. The voices that followed were soft, and the hands that wrote did not shake. The debrief revealed nothing glamorous, only competence. Times aligned across note-takers to within seconds. Headings varied by a few degrees, exactly as Vantage would predict. Sensation reports overlapped without parroting. Hum felt, pressure logged, warmth noted. Dull questions were asked and answered. Were clocks synchronized? Were any lenses flaring? Could known traffic account for the whole? And the answers narrowed options without insisting on conclusions. The night did not change the world. It changed the people who had practiced how to meet it. Elsewhere the same year, circles experimented with synchronized attention across distance. At an agreed minute they breathed in the same pattern, softened their gaze into wide soft attention, and held the sky as if it were one shared dome stretched over far-flung hills. No demand was made of the unknown. Sometimes, minutes later, separate logs would record brief appearances, triangles, hovering spheres, a pulse above the horizon, so similar in timing and geometry that coincidence felt thin. Whether the exercises drew events or only tuned perception remained an honest question. The practice continued because the practice improved people regardless of outcome. By the end of 2015, that ethic had a body. It looked like people who could sit together for hours without growing mean. It sounded like quiet voices comparing observations before opinions. It felt like fear still present but metabolized, a wave that passed rather than a wall that stopped. The circles understood, in their bones, that rehearsal had given way to overture. The page had turned not with trumpets, but with a steadier pulse in the human nervous system. Whatever came next would ask for more of the same: humility, precision, and the courage to remain ordinary while standing in the path of extraordinary things. Between 2016 and 2017, the encounter sharpened as if a new module in the curriculum had opened. Lights appeared lower than before and lingered longer, pulsing in ways that felt responsive to the emotional weather of the group. When fear spiked, brightness fell away or vanished. When calm returned, breath lengthened, shoulders softened, jaws unclenched, the lights often reappeared. The circles learned to treat this not as spectacle but as feedback, a biofeedback loop rid across the sky. The visitors, whatever their nature, seemed less interested in convincing anyone than in measuring whether composure could be maintained under stronger pressure. Physical signatures became early warnings. A metallic taste at the back of the tongue, a sweep of warmth over the forearms during a cold night, pressure behind the eyes, or a low tone more felt than heard. All of these arrived in repeatable sequences minutes or seconds before emergence. The checklists added boxes: hum, hush, warmth, pressure, taste. The point was not to glorify sensations but to map them. When circles compared anonymized notes months later, these preludes aligned as reliably as headings and durations. Dreams across distance grew uncannily specific. People who had never met wrote of being approached slowly by radiant beings who communicated without words. The lesson was not prophecy or doctrine. It was posture. Keep the feet grounded, let the jaw soften, lengthen the exhale exactly when surprise tightens the chest. Some woke with tears and no fear. Others woke with the sensation of a lesson completed, as if a long-forgotten instrument had been tuned overnight. The network did not mistake these dreams for commands. It treated them as interior data, useful when structure repeated and ignorable when decoration tried to seduce. A memorable field night in early 2016 pushed the curriculum further. A sphere the color of warm metal hovered above the tree line for nearly 15 minutes, shifting hue and silence. The circle's discipline held. No one sprinted for devices in the first minute. Breath was regulated, headings estimated, timings marked, sensations logged. Only after the first wave passed did a few attempt photographs, most of which caught nothing but darkness and shaken stars. The logs, however, were clean and convergent. Later, when the entries were collated, the event read like a single account written by many steady hands. Mistakes remained part of the education. A drone fooled a team until its persistent hum betrayed the trick. A satellite train, seen from an unusual angle, imitated intention. A helicopter on approach looked briefly like a hovering orb. Each error returned as training. Optics drills at home, a pocket sound library to teach the ear, real-time checks that one person could run without losing the sky. Confidence grew not by denying error but by metabolizing it. The circles also refined how they cared for people. Not everyone meets ambiguity easily. After strong events, guides initiated simple debrief rituals: water first, food second, words third. They helped participants discharge adrenaline with short, standing movements before sitting to write. They paired newcomers with steady partners who checked in the next day without prying. The goal was not to produce bravado but to protect gentleness so the practice could continue for years. Across these seasons, the ethic of anonymity held firm. No rosters, no maps, no named sites, no personalities at the center. Authority, such as it was, meant the capacity to distribute authority, to train others to do what you can do, and then get out of the way. The unknown would be met by citizens, not by stars. Backhand index pointing right and you? Have you ever noticed your own calmness, or the lack of it, changing what unfolded around you? Tell us in the comments, and consider following so these accounts reach others who value rigor as much as wonder. In late 2017, several circles scheduled quiet resonance sessions across distance. At an agreed minute, each group held the same posture and breath for 60 seconds, then softened gaze to the widest comfortable field. No one asked the sky to perform. Nevertheless, independent logs later showed brief, precise appearances within minutes of one another. A triangle here, a hovering point there, a pulse like a heartbeat above the horizon elsewhere. The culture did not rush to claim causation. It strengthened its questions and continued the work. What distinguished this period most was the steady replacement of certainty with capacity as the measure that mattered. Participants stopped framing their nights as success or failure. They began to ask, how well did we remain lucid? How accurately did we record? Did we care for one another when adrenaline spiked? These questions, repeated and lived, built a kind of competence that outlived any single event. If the visitors were testing, the circles were passing, not because the sky had been captured on perfect footage, but because human beings had learned how to stand inside the unknown without breaking it or themselves. From 2018 through 2019, the network multiplied like a pattern rather than an organization. Circles appeared in new places not because anyone authorized them, but because the method was simple, durable, and kind. Arrive quietly. Regulate breath. Widen gaze to include the periphery. Notice without demanding. Write before speaking. Compare notes without ego. Rest. Nothing about this required special equipment or special people, which was precisely why it could spread without distortion. The culture reproduced itself on the strength of its habits. Phenomena multiplied in parallel. Independent groups reported synchronized episodes on the same nights, emergence along the horizon, geometric holds that ignored wind, dimming that behaved like brightness folding inward, reappearance at a new point as if distance were a choice and not a law. When anonymized logs were collated weeks later, timings aligned within narrow windows and angles differed only by what vantage would predict. Coincidence remained a word the culture respected, but it began to fit like a shirt a size too small. Children entered the practice in greater numbers, by invitation and with care. They were taught short intervals of stillness that felt like play, not punishment, and the basic courtesy of writing what they saw before asking what it meant. They learned to name clouds without romance and to recognize how stars drift across hours. Parents reported a spillover effect. Children who could describe the sky precisely also learned to describe their feelings precisely, which made the practice an ally of ordinary family life. Dreams kept functioning as a classroom. Across these years, many accounts included geometric structures that resonated like chords and sequences of movement that demanded balance under pressure. People woke with the sense that their bodies had practiced a stance, feet grounded, jaw soft, breath long, so that the mind would not need to invent courage later. No hang-on-every-word revelations, no melodrama. The curriculum remained patient and physical, as if shaping a species for dialogue requires posture before philosophy. Quick pause. Does this way of working with the unknown, disciplined, collaborative, nearly invisible, resonate with you? Leave a comment and follow the channel so these stories reach people who value rigor as much as wonder. Resonance sessions across distance became more deliberate. At agreed minutes, circles adopted shared breath patterns and posture, then relaxed into wide, soft attention. On a handful of nights, independent logs later revealed near simultaneous appearances, 3 points forming a triangle in one region while, minutes away by time zone, a single point in another held steady above a horizon before fading like a lamp behind milk glass. Whether the groups were tuning to a signal, or the signal was tuning to the groups remained an open question. The practice continued because it made people better at being calm, truthful, and kind, outcomes valuable regardless of metaphysics. The network's ethics hardened without hardening hearts. Anonymity remained non-negotiable. No maps, no rosters, no named sites, no personalities at the center. Anyone who tried to monetize gatherings was thanked and released. Anyone who sought spotlight learned that attention is not the currency here, steadiness is. The unknown would not be sold as content. It would be met as relationship. One widely studied night near the end of 2019 shows how competence looked in practice. The air was crisp and dry. A low tone arrived like a string plucked somewhere inside the chest. Insects hushed. A small light rose from the horizon, held position as if distance had no claim, and was joined by two others that locked into an equilateral shape. For several minutes the triangle hovered, then folded into one, dimmed without shrinking, and was gone. The circle did not cheer. It breathed. It waited 5 minutes more before anyone spoke. Then, in soft voices, they compared timelines and sensations. Later, when anonymized excerpts from other regions were collated, the same sequence appeared, offset by minutes, altered by weather, but unmistakably kin. Auditing matured alongside practice. Rotating teams, never the same twice, sampled logs for drift toward drama and checked that clocks had been synchronized. They asked dull questions that yielded bright clarity. Was fatigue noted? Were satellite passes checked in real time? Did any phrasing echo prior famous entries? The aim was to keep enthusiasm from outpacing accuracy. Restraint, it turned out, did not dim the strange. It made the strange easier to see against a clean background. By the close of 2019, many participants sensed a crescendo approaching. The visitors had demonstrated that they could orchestrate experiences across distance without collapsing the privacy of those involved. The circles had demonstrated that they could meet those experiences without panic or spectacle. Between those two demonstrations, a bridge was no longer something to wish for. It was something people were already walking, one breath at a time. In private reflections, participants admitted that the work had quietly rewired daily life. Waiting rooms felt less punishing. Arguments de-escalated faster. Sleep returned more easily. If the sky never opened further, these changes would still be worth the hours in the cold. If it did, they would be essential. The decade that began in 2020 tested not only the circles but the wider world. Uncertainty expanded from night fields into daytime life. For people trained under ambiguous skies, the skills shifted from specialized to essential. They already knew how to breathe when dread pressed the chest, how to keep attention wide when fear tried to narrow it, how to cooperate without a spotlight. A practice designed for meeting the unknown became a practice for meeting each other when everything felt unknown at once. Phenomena during these years seemed tuned to that theme. Lights appeared during collective moments of anxiety, then withdrew when clamor rose, as if to underscore that the point was never proof but capacity. Dreams offered tutorials in resilience rather than revelation. Sustain posture when surprise tightens everything. Lengthen the exhale when the mind rushes ahead to worst-case stories. Notice the ground under your feet until the body remembers it is held. People woke quieter than they had any right to be, considering the headlines. The circles stayed invisible on purpose. No names, no maps, no leaders, no public schedules. The ethic was not secrecy, it was hygiene. Anonymity protected private lives and kept attention on the craft rather than on personalities. Growth happened like roots, out of sight, holding soil that would otherwise slide. Newcomers learned quickly that the culture rewards the unglamorous virtues: show up on time, carry blankets, keep notes, listen first, and leave places cleaner than you found them. Participants noticed changes at home that no instrument could measure. Fear of death softened. Sleep improved. Conversations slowed to a pace that allowed meaning to arrive before performance took over. Children taught to sit still for 90 seconds could sit with difficult feelings for longer than that. Neighbors who might have rolled eyes at one another's hobbies shared thermoses on chilly hills and learned the sound of silence together. The practice made people better at being human. The encounters made that improvement feel necessary, not optional. At the same time, the sky did not retire. Independent logs continued to capture orchestrated episodes across distance, triangles holding above horizons in several regions within minutes, solitary points dimming like lamps lowered behind opaque glass, brief beams touching ground and leaving subtle impressions in grass that faded after a day or two. Preludes repeated, the hush, the hum, the pressure, the sweep of warmth. The curriculum remained consistent: reward steadiness, starve spectacle, train cooperation. Auditing practices matured further. An anonymized repository allowed rotating teams to collate times, headings, durations, and reported sensations while stripping away anything that could identify people or places. Logs were checked against satellite passes and air traffic records by volunteers who preferred spreadsheets to stories. When alignment appeared, it was presented plainly. When discrepancies remained, they were mapped rather than massaged. The point was to keep the frame clean enough that whatever entered it could be seen for what it was. The circles also invested in care. After intense nights, guides encouraged warm food, water, and sleep before any analysis. People who woke from strong dreams were told to write before speaking and to avoid turning impressions into theories by noon. Those who struggled received quiet company rather than grand explanations. The ethic was simple: guard gentleness so courage does not burn out. A question surfaced often in late-night conversations: why this method? Why not undeniable daylight displays that end arguments in a stroke? The best answer was an inference built from years of repetition, because capacity outlives certainty. A spectacle can be denied the next day or swallowed by noise. A population trained to remain lucid under ambiguity cannot be easily undone. The visitors, if that is the correct word, appeared to prefer thresholds to finales, tuning phenomena to the exact edge where discipline is rewarded and performance is useless. Under that tuning, people grew. By the mid-2020s, a calm conclusion had settled across the network. The gift of this era was not what anyone could prove to outsiders. It was who they had become together, citizens with steadier hands, wider attention, and gentler reflexes. The bridge between worlds, if one exists, will be crossed by people like that or not at all. If noon comes and the sky speaks in ways no one can dismiss, these citizens will breathe and listen while others rush to judgment. If noon never comes, the same citizens will still be valuable, to families, to neighbors, to a frayed public square, because they know how to remain kind when the frame wobbles. In that light, the instruction embedded in the years after 2015 reads like a short list. Prepare the body. Protect anonymity. Subtract the ordinary before invoking the extraordinary. Describe what happened rather than declaring what it meant. Care for each other before you theorize. Keep practicing when nothing happens. Keep practicing when everything does. None of this is glamorous. All of it is durable. And durability, the circles learned, is what the unknown respects. The story therefore closes without closing. The lights continue, subtle, repeatable, tuned to capacity. The dreams continue, quiet lessons in posture and breath. The people continue, arriving early, staying late, writing carefully, laughing softly, cleaning up, going home, and returning when the weather allows. If contact one day steps fully into the open, it will recognize them by the way they stand, jaws soft, breath long, attention wide, hands steady. If not, they will have lived as if such steadiness were worth learning anyway. Either outcome is a kind of success, the kind that doesn't need a headline to be real. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who are also fascinated by UFOs. And leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened?